Hey fellow tennis nerds, I hope all is well. It's time to update you on some pro player racket specs. I get sent stuff over Instagram, thanks to you who do that. Got some specs on Raducanu's racket from Racket Spec. It was a picture that was kind of, you had to twist it upside down and then zoom in on the picture to see her unstrung specs. So the unstrung specs is around 30 swing weight points lower than the strung specs. She usually uses a All Power and a gut hybrid. All Power mains gut crosses these days, as far as I can see. And the racket is a Wilson BLX Steam 100. You can see that through the kind of four main grommets that there are white on that model. That's one way to tell that she's using that. She is endorsing though the Wilson Blade 98, 16, 19. Because they're not selling the Steam 100, which is used by Badosa and a few other pros on the WTA Tour. But her unstrung specs are very human and they are quite manageable. So let's get into them. From the sticker, her player sticker, it's 305 grams unstrung, so close to what a blade is, but this is not a blade, it's a Steam. So it has a bigger head size of 100 square inches. Giving you more power, more room for error and so on. 286 swing weight, so that's a pretty low swing weight. You add 30 points, you're gonna get it up to 316 to 320 depending on the strings. Quite manageable, and many of you can use that swing weight. I think most of us actually use higher swing weights while we might not need it. So this racket is quite maneuverable. So if you add strings, you're gonna get approximately, I'm adding strings over grip, 328 grams, 318 swing weight, and a 32.3 centimeter balance. That's around 5 points head light. So this is a racket that we could pick up and I'm sure we could use it. It's a pretty forgiving racket, gives you good power. The Steam model is relatively stiff and a nice racket to play with if you want extra power and spin and so on. Has a 16-20 string pattern. So don't think it's a 98 square inch blade. It's actually a Steam 100 BLX that you used before. So should we use more specs like WTA players? Definitely. I think a lot of us could use that. Use a Pure Drive, Instinct, a Boom, whatever, rackets that are a little bit more forgiving. It's not for everyone. If you're getting a very heavy ball at you, you're playing on a higher level, you might very much need a higher spec to deal with the incoming ball, and depend a bit on your style. If you have a more old school flat through the court style, if you have a more whippy topspin oriented style, the specs should kind of reflect that as well. But many of us play with heavy specs, and I've done a video about typical racket mistakes that you might do that I have already made for you. So it's the 8 common racket mistakes. You can find this video on this YouTube channel, so check that out. You might be making some of. One more spec to get out of the way is the Miomir Kecmanovic. I wanted to mention him. A really talented Serbian player, 22 years old, at his career high now, 32 in the world, and he's playing really well. He used to use a Pure Aero Tour, 2016 Pure Aero Tour with heavy specs, but not outrageous specs, pretty close to the stock there. 336 grams, 32.3 centimeter balance, which is 5 points head light, and a 334 strung swing weight. Don't know what strings he used back then when he used the Pure Aero Tour. I would guess RPM Blast. He got a sponsorship deal with Dunlop, and then he has to change model, of course. And he went with Dunlop's spin line, the SX, and used the SX 300, which he has added weight to the sides. So he has added lead tape at 3 and 9 to bump up the swing weight and the stability and the power level of the racket. I would assume he's using very similar specs, because the pros rarely change their specs, although they might change to a different model. They still remain within the same spec range, because that's where the weight balance and swing weight, that's where the big change is usually when you're switching rackets. And the SX 300 is quite similar to the Pure Aero, so he's not using something that will feel completely alien. They will respond a bit differently. The SX 300 has a slightly tighter string pattern, so you get a bit more control. And this was the model that came out before this 2022 model, the 2020 SX, I think it was. So the newer model is a little bit stiffer, a bit lighter to swing. The older model was a little bit more flexible, higher swing weights, a bit more demanding, but they made the rackets a bit easier to use for the SX line in 2022. So that's the likely spec range of Miomir Kecmanovic and his Dunlop SX 300, which is strings with explosive spin, a Dunlop string, it's a good string as well, to get that heavy topspin game that Kecmanovic has. So Raducanu, Kecmanovic, what spec would you prefer? I tend to like heavier rackets, but when a racket like the SX 300 gets too heavy, the swing weight is up 334, it's gonna be too powerful for me to control because I don't have that natural topspin. So I like to hit more through the court, so I'd probably play better with the Raducanu, although none of these two rackets are actually where I want to be. I'm more in the 98 range with a tighter pattern and so on. That's where I feel more comfortable. But keen to hear which kind of spec would you go, the more male-oriented 334, and this is ATP Pro style specs, or would you like a more WTA style specs with a bit more forgiveness? Both rackets are relatively powerful and spin friendly, and that's the trend we're seeing on both tours, that the rackets are getting technically a little bit easier to generate power, spin, depth and so on with. That's all for this video. Please check out my affiliates. The links are in the description, such as Play Your Court, where you can find a hitting partner or a coach, 50% off with my code. I've also created a deals page where you find all the other tennis nerd deals, so you can get a discount on any of the products and services I recommend. Only stuff I like myself, otherwise I don't put it there. And if you want to support the work I do, you can also join patreon.com/tennisnerd, where you get more content. That's all. Have a nice day now, and don't forget to play some tennis.